Today on Questions Answered, we're talking about sensors, cadence and torque sensors specifically, and those are the things that activate your e-bike motor. And the first question is, what are cadence and torque sensors, and what's their purpose? And that's what it is. They inform the motor's controller about pedaling input, and they work differently from one another and have different riding characteristics and different benefits. So we're going to get into that. What is a cadence sensor? To understand what a cadence sensor is, you should first know what cadence is, and cadence is the speed at which you pedal. So a cadence sensor reads that, and the way it does it is it uses an arrangement of magnets that rotate with the crankset and a Hall sensor that detects the presence of those magnets. So it then sends the information about the rotation of the crankset to the motor controller, which determines how much power to send from the battery to the motor. Cadence sensors vary in how sensitive they are. Cheaper, more basic cadence sensors pretty much determine whether you're pedaling or not. And nicer cadence sensors can deliver more information about your pedal placement, so they can create a more responsive feel from the motor. The Priority E-Coast and E-Classic Plus both use cadence sensors. And we use nicer cadence sensors that deliver a good amount of information to the motor controller, so it delivers a nice ride feel. What is a torque sensor? A torque sensor measures pedaling force by using a strain gauge, which creates resistance for an electrical system as the structure that it's connected to deforms. So that deformation in the structure deforms the strain gauge and sends a signal to the motor controller as well. So based on how much pedaling force you're putting into the crankset, the motor controller responds and sends power from the battery to the motor in proportion to that amount of force. For mid-drive motors that are mounted in the middle of the pedals, the torque sensor is part of the motor or mounted inside the body where the cranks mount directly onto it. Torque sensors can also be mounted separately from a motor in the case of a hub motor and be part of the bottom bracket and mount directly to the pedals or cranks. In some cases, torque sensors can also be mounted as part of the rear wheel or part of the hub motor, as such is the case with the Priority Skyline. So what are the benefits of a cadence sensor? The biggest one is it's a lot less expensive. It's also easier to install and replace, and it works with a lot of different types of bikes and different types of motor configurations. And the difference in terms of ride feel can also be of benefit. It requires less pedaling force to activate, which can work really well to deliver a casual and low effort ride feel. What are the drawbacks of cadence sensors? Well, the biggest one would be that it doesn't deliver as natural a ride feel as a torque sensor, because it can kind of feel like the motor is either on or off. You know, it comes on when you're pedaling and it is off when you're not pedaling. So it doesn't necessarily deliver power proportionally to how much effort you're putting in, and that makes it feel less natural. It can also be less efficient because of that simple pedaling detection, it can deliver more power than you necessarily need at a given time. So, the motor can be working a bit more than you need. So what are the benefits of a torque sensor? And the biggest one is a more natural ride feel. Because with a torque sensor, the more power you put in through the pedals, the more power the motor delivers. So it feels like more of a natural extension of your pedaling. It can also be more efficient because it delivers just as much power as you're asking for in that moment with your pedaling input. What are the drawbacks of the torque sensor? The biggest one is it's much more expensive than a cadence sensor. And it also limits kind of packaging options because it either has to be mounted in the motor or in the bottom bracket for the most part, except for when it comes to very specific motors like the one that we have on our Priority Skyline. But in general, it can be hard to package torque sensors with every motor option. Another potential drawback for beginner riders is that it requires more advanced riding abilities to ride with a torque sensor in some ways, because in order to take full advantage, you have to really know how to use your gears, and it does require more effort. You have to push down on the pedals to activate the motor. What is ghost pedaling or sailing? This is something that is a ride characteristic or something that you can do with a cadence sensor specifically, where if you slowly spin the pedals while at speed, not enough to actually put power down into the drivetrain for yourself, but enough to activate the cadence sensor, it activates the motor without you really putting any effort into the pedaling force. So in some ways you could call this a disadvantage because the bike doesn't feel natural when you do this. But on the other hand, it allows you to ride at a speed that's faster than what you can pedal and really just use the motor to achieve this speed. So it's a little bit of a riding hack in some ways too, that you can do only with a cadence sensing bike. So who should buy a bike with a cadence sensor? If you're on a budget and you ride mostly on flat terrain and prefer a simple and low effort riding experience, a cadence sensor will deliver on all of those things. So who should buy a bike with a torque sensor? Riders looking for a natural feel or who really care about the pedaling experience, or riders who want to have a more athletic ride and push themselves harder on the bike will appreciate a torque sensor more. It's also a better choice for riders in more hilly areas or who want more efficiency and control. If you have any other questions about torque or cadence sensors or anything else bike related, post it in the comments and we'll get to it in a future video. Thanks for watching.